Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our monthly NICAR, formerly known as CRE Broker Forum, but we are changing it to NICAR Deal Making. And each month, generally the end of the month, and generally Tuesdays, unless the presenter has a different agenda and or it coincides with a holiday, we do try to always meet every month, though, and give our NICAR members especially an opportunity to present some information, and then everyone who participates in the call can go over whatever their top priority is, whether it's a listing, whether they're representing landlord, seller, buyer, tenant, need to contact. We're all here to help each other. I always ask that everyone stay on the full time if they can, especially for the needs and wants, and so that we could be here to help each other. So just remember, when someone has something, you say, am I interested? Do I have a client that would be interested? Do I know someone, maybe another broker that could help them? You know, we might not always get paid on the deal, but we're paying it forward, helping each other to get deals done. That's why we're a collaborative community here at NICAR. So, many of you are regular participants, and I appreciate you coming on. And if you have any topics that you think would be really great for our group, happy to listen, especially if you have presenters that you think are connected with presenters that you think would do a great job and give us great information. Please do look out for other events at NICAR. There are broker breakfasts, there's education. I am going to start teaching CRE Kickstart. There's a webpage that's almost finished out there, so starting sometime July and August, we'll have both online and in person, and that will help agents who are thinking about or curious, commercial curious, and looking into it. And then I usually suggest taking further classes through CCIM to enhance your education. And speaking of CCIM, I have a fellow friend, peer colleague, Simon, who is a CCIM, and I feel like he is versatile and knows about everything. He is a managing broker, just like myself, and very knowledgeable in the commercial real estate world, but specifically, he's going to talk about data centers today. So Simon, if you want to give us just a little bit of background about you and what you have, and I don't really know a ton about data centers. I've been doing more multifamily and resorts, but I'm sure you're here to tell us everything that we need to know.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Theresa. Thank you to NICAR for having me on, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I know you could be in Vegas at ICSC. You could be doing showings, you could be doing listing appointments. So we appreciate you being here, and thanks for listening. So I have a specialty. I sell data center development sites. I also run a full service brokerage in multiple states, and we are very AI focused and tech forward. And so a little bit about me. I was born actually in the UK. I grew up in California. I went to college in Arizona, and I moved to Chicago because my fiance at the time was here. I got into real estate because I had to. I was out of college, and it was the Great Recession. So, I was out there looking for jobs. I would apply for 100 jobs, get 2 interviews, and get 0 jobs, right? So my fiance at the time's family was nice enough to let me borrow a small amount of money. I was able to buy a very beat up condo and flip that after living in it for a short time. Did that for a while. And in 2016, got pretty good at it. And we had a development company in 2017 and 18. I was able to get into the REIT business. I was one of the first in the world to digitize REIT securities. Unfortunately, the SEC didn't qualify digital securities at the time, but I was able to learn a lot about REITs and meet with a lot of different institutional investors and things like that. 2020 came around. It was COVID, and I was able to get licensed as a broker. We had that part of the business, but I was never a broker, even though we owned a brokerage. So 2020 got into the brokerage business myself as a broker, and I was at SVN as a senior advisor for about 3 years. Worked in their Wisconsin and Florida offices. And then in 23, I started SENW. We are now in 5 states, and I specialize in data center development sites, but we have agents that do things all over. And I see a lot of familiar faces today. Some people I've done deals with, some people have referred me deals, so I want to say thank you. We have some CCIMs in the house. I want to say hello and thank you to them. CCIM has been a great kind of family for me. I'm lucky enough to be the president-elect of the Illinois chapter. I'll tell you just this week, 2 deals that are getting put together through other CCIMs, and it's strictly relationship based. So I think it's really important. We are having 2 classes this year in Illinois, here in Chicago at the NAR building. One in July and one in August. So, reach out. I'd be happy to tell you about those classes. And then we also have a event actually happening June 9th at the Candlelight in Chicago from 3 to 5. We have a special rate for NICAR members. It's free if you're a CCIM Illinois member, and it's a heavily discounted rate if you're a NICAR member. So look out for those. And I'll get right into it. So, I'll try to make this more about what to look for. I'm not going to get into too many specifics unless you want me to, but I'll try to make this, about what to look for in sites. And, if you see something, say something kind of thing. So that way you're also educated when people ask you about data centers, and what that means to your community. Because obviously that's a big factor in data centers today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And okay, so if I can get, I know there's a whiteboard out. Deanna, you have a whiteboard up. It won't let me share the screen unless, since I'm collaborating on a whiteboard. So
hold on one second. I'm going to see if we can get that resolved. Hang on.
So while we're waiting for that, if the audience can just drop a comment and let me know if they have heard of a data center before, if they know what it is, if they've been inside a data center before, or have no idea what they do. Just go ahead and drop a comment, just so I can see what everyone's thoughts are. Okay, so Theresa was at the data center show in Naperville. Anybody else been to one? Know what they are? Know what they do? So, okay. So basically, what a data center is when you think of the cloud is really just a building with a lot of servers in it. And those buildings are data centers. So they use a lot of power, and since AI has become very prevalent in use, that power consumption has increased dramatically because of the compute power needed for those servers, or those racks, I should say. And Dr. Mustafa is talking about the bad stuff about data centers, and we'll touch on that too. So let's see if I can share my screen. I can share my screen now. Okay. And can everybody see my screen? Just give me a thumbs up. All right. Perfect. Thanks, Getty. Okay. So I've made my introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about data centers. I'm an SIOR member associate. I'm a member of the Chicago chapter as well as the Wisconsin chapter. And the data center market growth has been incredible. I know you guys all hear about it in the news. You hear about it on Twitter, on LinkedIn. So we'll get right into it. You're going to see here the data center growth cap is enormous. I mean, we're talking one of the largest investments that are happening, and everything that's adjacent to data centers as well. It's one of the largest investments that are happening globally. So what does that mean for why states want them? Well, there's a big tax basis, right? So these buildings are typically new industrial type buildings or industrial adjacent buildings. I mean, they're not going to be a cross dock or a 3PL or even a cold storage. They're built for data centers specifically. They'll, especially now, they're actually building them in record time using modular techniques. So adaptive reuse is not really, we haven't seen any great adaptive reuse uses, especially based on the cost of these buildings, but they do create a tax-based revenue, and you're able to get that, that tax base into the school districts, for example, without any extra kids, right? So no kids live in data centers, or we hope not. They create a lot of construction jobs. If you can imagine, these are high-paying, skilled labor jobs to build these data centers. A lot of times that, people are coming in from outside the area, and they're staying in the area to build these data centers. Like, for example, in Stargate, that's happening over in Texas, you see groups of skilled construction workers going from all around the country, and they're going to Stargate to build those data centers. So, what does that mean for your state? I think it's a signal for your city and your state and your county that you are tech forward. And then the number one thing I think it kind of brings up is the infrastructure, right? So we have the most data centers in the world, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but the infrastructure is where we're lagging behind. So if you can imagine, our power infrastructure is well behind that of other countries, like China. And so, that's a sore point. We need to upgrade our infrastructure because that's our bottleneck, right? In the power, consumption, and that's the infrastructure. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So, about data centers, about a year ago, and this is how fast they're moving. The average size, and these are small and large buildings, hyperscalers and non-hyperscalers, but the average size was about 30 megawatts of power going into a data center just last year. So now we got the average amount of power going into a data center is 38 megawatts. Okay, and that's from a very recent study from AFCOM. What does that tell you? I mean, are you looking at any other industry where you're seeing 20% increases in things like power, right? So no, 20% is a huge jump, and we're not even seeing. I think it's going to continue on that scale until we hit that bottleneck, which is our infrastructure. So there's about 13,500 data centers around the world. The U.S. has about 4,000 of them, which is the largest bulk of data centers. And we are not lagging behind in the amount of data centers. We have the most compute power, so we're well ahead. But we are going to come to a very substantial bottleneck when it comes to power. And so right now, for example, when we're selling data center sites, power, availability of power, speed to power is the most important factor. And I'll go over all the top 10 factors. And that's what I promised everybody here is I'm going to go over the top 10 factors of a data center. And I think that's the most important thing to take away from this. So, obviously you're going to see here, there's different models, depending on, how much power we need based on how much consumption for compute there is, how much consumption for power there is. I won't get into too much of that. But what's happened in Illinois? Illinois had a huge growth. We actually have, we're one of the states with some of the most data centers in the country. We've had incentives in the past, and I think those incentives spurred a lot of development of data centers here in Illinois. And, you're looking at a projected tax benefit of almost $1 billion over the course of those data centers. So it's a lot of money that, since then that's been stopped. They put a pause on those because of they wanted to slow that down a little bit. But one of the main things that happened was, BIPA, there was an amendment to BIPA, and that kind of slowed it down. There's also a lot of municipalities in Illinois that are kind of against data centers. And so, people now, that's not to say that data centers are not popping up in Illinois. One was recently approved. I was working on a deal this week in Illinois for almost a 300 megawatt data center, for example. So there's a lot of things still happening, but there's still a lot of things that are up in the air. And one of those is the Illinois Power Act, and that's still pending. So, keep an eye out for that just to see kind of like what happens with that. But that's some of the, and here's the effect. So if you can see the amount of spend of investment activity in data centers in Illinois, for example, you're seeing a huge growth rate. And then as soon as they pause the tax incentives and the potential for BIPA lawsuits or BIPA litigations, that's when you see some of that dropping off. So let's talk a little bit about the actual data centers. A hyperscaler, right? And even this is kind of old. A hyperscaler kind of, let's call it a campus, can be over a gigawatt. That's what they're looking for now for some of the big names that you're using every day, the companies that are very well known. But hyperscalers for campuses can use 100 to 500. Typically now the smallest AI hyperscaler campuses are going to need about 250 megawatts of power. That's a lot of power. And so there's actually not enough power in the grid to sustain the growth of the demand, because of the demand from, especially from AI and from other digital uses. So what data centers have done is they started looking at what's called behind the meter. And so what behind the meter is basically power generation activities that are not linked to the grid, that they can generate themselves. And then if they have a surplus, they can give it back to the grid. And some of those things can be solar farms, gas power turbines, you name it, right? They can have their own power plant. What's being talked about is small nuclear reactors. And those are actually starting to kind of come into play a little bit. Nuclear power is a big factor, I think, in data centers. And so over the next 10 years, you're going to see more, I think, nuclear power powering those data centers. And one of the new things that, if you watch the news or go on Twitter, Elon Musk has said in the next 36 months, he's going to send, data centers in space that are powered, by solar. So, in 3 years to do that, I think it's possible. It's very ambitious. Does that mean we're going to lose terrestrial data centers? I don't think so. I think demand is going to be so high that we probably need both. So, but okay, here are my top 10 factors for a data center site. And these are in order of importance for the data center. to be there. Okay. So number one is power. That's obvious. We talked about grid capacity. Are you near a substation? Do the buses on the substation have the power that you need? Is there a queue up in that substation that has, power going somewhere that may drop off? So, those are things to look at. And I do want to point out that a lot of the data centers that are under contract, or data center sites that are under contract right now, may fall out. They may fall out because, the community doesn't want them, financial issues from the buyers. So my job has been increasingly, the demand of my job has been increasing to qualify not only sites, but to qualify buyers, because if you can imagine, there's a huge demand for powered land. And so whenever there's a demand for powered land, you have a lot of people going in to try to put themselves in between these deals. But the problem is, if they don't know what they're doing, or don't have the capital behind them, or both, then things fall apart. And so they can also fall apart at the community level. And that brings me to the next most important topic, or factor, is that's the community, right? So in the past, the data center industry was, nobody paid too much attention to it. People were, people didn't know what it was. It's just a building going up, and they don't know what's inside. It's an industrial looking building. Well, now they've become a hot topic. And so, the community needs to know what's happening. I think this is where, realtors can come in. They can talk to their community leaders, to the municipalities that they're in. What I've always recommended is, if you're a municipality and you have a zone of influence for green fields around you, or you have old industrial sites or green fields in your municipality or city, I think the best practice would be to identify those sites ahead of time. So when a data center does come in and says, we want to place one here in your city, you can say, well, these are the sites that are available for you. And I think it's important for communities and community leaders to understand what that means, to talk about the water, to talk about the wastewater solutions, and how they're going to be addressed ahead of time. Look, data centers are not these, evil star empire that are going to control everything using AI. I think that without them, we're going to have big issues. We don't want to lose the AI superiority in the United States. I think it's even a defense issue. So we have to keep building these, but I think we should build them within the community, partnering with the community, and not, the old school kind of corporate mentality of just profits, right? I think they have to kind of be a good neighbor, and they have to go in the right locations. And it can be old, it can be like old brownfields where there's contamination, and that can get cleaned up, and they can improve the wastewater solutions at the municipality. I mean, there's a lot of good things that can come out of this, right? So it's not just the tax money, it's not just the construction jobs, but there's a lot of kind of urban blight or industrial blight that they can fix. And so I think it's good to work with communities ahead of time to kind of fix all that and make it right. I talked a little bit about water, wastewater. Time is important too, because of demand. Time for power delivery, for construction. These are all really important factors. And then, you need the internet, right? You need the fiber lines, redundancies. So data centers are up 24/7. They work at pretty much capacity 24/7. And so you need redundancies for both fiber lines, for power, for things like that. So, these are the 10 factors. If you're going to take anything away from this conversation or this webinar, I would just take a picture of these. This is the most important slide in this webinar. And then we talked a little bit about behind the meter, so I'll just touch on those again. Battery storage, BESS, solar, nuclear, on-site generation, that's behind the meter. So we talked a little bit about that. We talked about the community, so I'll breeze through these. But basically, yeah, get fluent on those 10 factors. Worker specialists that do data center sites, if you're not sure, or if you have an owner of an industrial building or an old R&D tower that is curious about their site, you can always reach out to the business development person at the utility company. You can reach out to me or another data center development site specialist. And now you know some of the items to answer or questions to answer when people ask you about data centers. So I appreciate everyone's time, and I think we can do a Q&A.
Thank you very much, Simon. If anyone has a question, if you could please raise your hand and I'll just go in the order of the questions that you have. One of my questions, because I was only half joking when I said the Naperville show, was we had a proposal for a data center, and I will say honestly, I was not actively involved and I was not going to sessions, but apparently it got very heated. Everyone, went to the 11th hour. Some of that was actually on the news, and in the end, they decided not to have a data center. And so and really it boils down to NIMBYism, right? The same issue with like affordable housing and lots of other things that always it's NIMBYism. They say, oh, we want all these things, but not in our neighborhood, right? Like, don't give it to us. And so what have you seen in terms of communities that found it acceptable, right? Like that there wasn't that pushback, was it just that income generation? Like what are you seeing from the community standpoint and when they find it acceptable versus not?
Yeah, good question. So I think, number one is education. Number two is transparency, right? So it's a very high in demand aspect of commercial real estate, right? So the sites are very expensive. The valuation of the sites, if they're powered, is much higher than any other use. And so a lot of these corporations, they tend to be secretive. They go under some random LLC. You'll never find out who the owner is. And so I think that needs to stop. Microsoft has already stopped doing that. So it's important to kind of be transparent about who you are, who's coming in, and what you're going to do. The other thing, I think, even for me, is the water consumption. Now, they can easily prevent high use of water consumption. So there's about a 200 megawatt site near Hoffman Estates, and they're using it's a closed loop system, so they get to recycle the water. And they're using about the water for 23 townhomes, which on that site, you could build way more than 23 townhomes. So that's not a big use of water. So now corporations do what corporations do. They're there for the shareholders to make money. I think it's up to the community to keep them accountable and to make sure that they're using responsible methods in the development of the data centers and their use. So I think transparency, and then just being a good neighbor and putting the communities over profits are important. But at the same time, we need them, right? Everyone here, this call is made available by one of these data center buildings. This webinar would not happen if it wasn't for a data center, right? So, we can say we don't want them all day long, but we use them. We use them every day. And they're extremely important for our infrastructure and for, our technology moving forward.
Thank you. Dr. Mustafa, you have a question?
Well, a question, also just a kind of a comment. I have family members that are engineers. I have a son that is developing a 500-acre data center outside of Memphis. have a best friend who is a civil engineer. And I'm hearing a lot of scuttlebutt, not necessarily, I don't know if it's accurate or not. So I'm going to call it scuttlebutt. One is saying that there is a oversupply of data centers, that we don't need as many data centers that is projected, because some of the data centers can handle more information than is required. I have another situation where one of the engineers saying that it's just data centers is just bad. Can you help me understand between these two? Because I got to separate the two.
So the one that says they're just bad, I mean, I can't answer that because I don't know what the bad entails. But I can answer the question about compute to a degree. I mean, obviously, so I sell the sites. I'm pretty early in the cycle. I don't touch the data centers themselves. I work on the sites, but I can tell you this. If you have a data center site, and you have an overcompute, right? So you build too many data centers, the miniaturization gets better, the GPUs are more powerful, and we don't have the demand that we're thinking we're going to have. Well, what's going to happen with that? Number one, we're going to overbuild, right, on the data centers. Number two, we're going to overbuild on the infrastructure or the power to generate power for those data centers behind the meter and on the grid. So in that situation, like you're referring to, we're going to have an oversupply of both compute power and power. Well, just like in any market economy, if you have an oversupply of compute power and an oversupply of power, that would bring down the prices of power and compute power. So what does that mean for you? Well, if they overbuild the infrastructure and we have an abundance of power, our power bills will likely come down. Okay. Number two, if you have an overabundance of compute power, the subscriptions, which are right now highly subsidized. So, don't think your $20 ChatGPT subscription is paying for it's costing them a lot more than that. I mean, they're losing billions of dollars and they're subsidizing those subscriptions. If you look at Claude, there's a $200 plan. If you max out that CLI plan on Claude, if you look at the token equivalent of that plan, you're talking about thousands of dollars, right, every month. And so right now they're extremely subsidizing all these plans to get market share. So my point is, we currently have a high demand. It's being subsidized also. So if we have a overcompute of power and an oversupply of compute and an oversupply of power, then the prices would just come down. So is it a bad thing? I don't think so. I mean, we need to build up that infrastructure anyway. So, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that our trajectory is going to be, pretty strong. The demand for AI continues. And, the more driverless cars we have, soon, we're seeing robotics kind of jump in, a lot of manufacturing. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think that are going to come up that we don't even know about that are going to use a lot of this compute power. So I hope I answered your question as best I could, Dr. Mustafa.
Thank you very much, Simon. If there are no other questions, please make certain that you put all your contact information in the chat. We are going to end the recording shortly. And just know that going forward, NICAR is changing the webpage. It is generally this at the end of the month. It will just going in the future. We will have NICAR deal making instead of CRE broker forum, and where everyone will have an opportunity to do needs and wants just just like after today's recording. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for presentations and or even the deal making portion, I'm always happy to hear. You can reach me, Theresa Mueller, at info@theresamueller.com, or reach out through info@NICAR.com for any, certainly any general NICAR questions. And please do check out some of our other programming. Without any other questions for Simon, we appreciate your time, Simon, and this really great presentation. This gives everyone here more, even if they're not specifically working on data centers, it gives them more general awareness of what's happening, and if it comes to their community, and or if their clients are asking questions, whether they can answer the simple questions or defer them to Simon and anything data center. Looks like we have one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. Ahmed, you have a question. If you could please unmute yourself and let us know your thoughts. And video is great too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Simon, thank you. Great information. There's so much, so little we know. But I'd like you to comment on the neighborhood I live in, and Theresa is also, Naperville and Lisle. And the facility in Lisle has been sitting there for decades. And, it had a lot of controversy, the lock farm facility. The village was very eager, but not in my neighborhood. Overwhelmingly, the community rejected it, and so they basically backed off. And we had a similar reaction in Naperville. So can you just give us a little background to that? What do you think? How is this going to be? Do you think this is going to be the kind of reaction we're going to find in more affluent neighborhoods compared to getting further out of the metropolitan area?
Yeah, good question. Okay, so the AI hyperscalers themselves, they can go anywhere. They just need those 10 factors. They're usually very large sites. They're usually very power hungry sites. So the AI hyperscalers can go pretty much anywhere. Right now, the demand is for power. And so if there's substations or power generation near cities that have power, they're going to go there. There's other types of data centers like edge sites or co-locators that need to be near major cities or need to be near populated areas and infrastructure. So those are a little bit different. But it's really just going to be a market economy based on the power, and then they're going to test any piece of powered land that is substantial. A data center right now will try to go there just because of the high demand. I don't think it matters if it's an affluent or a non-affluent area, for the data center, right? So they want to go where the power is. And I think that we just go back to the community factor. What are they doing? Well, what's the data center going to do to improve that community? Are they going to be a good neighbor? What's going to happen in that area that's going to help? And then another thing is, most data centers are codified in many municipalities as heavy industrial. And so a lot of heavy industrial sites, by right, can build a data center without the community getting involved, or zoning hearings or anything like that. So that's also something to think about. But I wanted to say thank you for everyone for listening. If you have any questions, I did drop my information here in the chat, as well as my email. So you know what? I didn't put my email, so I'll do that now. But Theresa, thank you, and Deanna, thank you for putting it together.